I really, really wish that you all could see what I see when I look out at your beautiful faces. Actually, who was here last week? A few of you, okay. Do any of you want to carpe this particular moment of your vitam and see the room from here? Come on, seize the moment while it's here. Isn't that, look. Aren't they gorgeous? Yeah, the eye of Sauron is shining over there. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. You see everybody, there's the Mona looking from the middle of the aisle. Were you gonna carry Gina? No? Okay. Isn't it gorgeous? You wonder why I'm always like, wow, everybody kind of glows from up here. It's really, really neat. Okay, so the last couple of weeks, we have been exploring the sacred symbol of the cross. And the cross wasn't on the original list of symbols that I'd planned to explore. Excuse me a moment, my microphone keeps getting caught in my hair. So this wasn't originally on the list, right? Because I do 5 and 5, it's always 5. This is 6, cool, I'll run with it. The thing is, someone, whose name I won't mention now that he's actually here. Somebody, Mr. Israelson maybe, expressed an interest, and after I sat with that idea for a little while, I decided to run with it, and I have been running in entirely unpredictable directions, right? Because you come to a church and you hear that the minister is diving deep into the symbolism of the cross, right? And then they talk about crossroads and treasure maps. But nobody asked for my take on the Christian cross, just the cross. And so I've been taking full advantage of that. A lot of ministers would be afraid to stand in a church and talk about a cross without making it all about the death of a Christ and a holy resurrection. But, and I know that this is a very well-hidden secret, so don't tell anyone, especially you folks online, because we wouldn't want to upset our image here. But I am not your average minister. Not even by a little. I am kind of, we'll go with unique. I'm unique. And I know that's difficult to believe given my intensely dogma-filled approach to faith, but it's true. And lucky you get to sit there and let me doodle all over the page, outside of all of the lines where you sit in those super comfy, well-padded pews? No? Okay. Well, thank you for humoring me then. So for the last 2 weeks, the idea of how I wanted to approach things came pretty easily, but I had no clue when I got to this week, until I started thinking out loud in the direction of my blessedly patient and cardiovascularly healthy partner, Mike, in the car last week. I often display my inner thoughts on the outside, as any choir member will tell you, and I do that just to kind of keep track of things, and it's a sounding board that helps me hear me. And I'm sure that poor Mike discreetly tunes me out altogether a lot of the time. He says, never. Yeah. This time I realized that this thing becomes something entirely different when you do this. Right? When you do that, and you kind of stand back and you take a look at it, you realize that what's there looks like 4 areas of division, right? 4 distinctly separated zones. In fact, it looks like a borderless 4-square grid, right? You remember that game? Does everybody know what that is? You have a grid with 4 squares, and it's usually painted on concrete or blacktop or whatever, and has the 4 boxes. And 1 player or 2 players stand in each box, and you take turns bouncing the ball to each other. It has to go underhand, and you have to let it bounce once. No more than once, and that's the strategy. And that's where the sermon title came from, sort of, because although this definitely does resemble a playground game, it also looks like lines of scrimmage, borders, boundaries, perhaps little clubs or communities. It's a very clear visual representation of us versus them, or 4 areas of themness, if you will. Separation. But there's another factor here, and I want to revisit the way that we looked at this from Talk 1 for a bit. Hold on. So, Talk 1. So this bit here, this horizontal, okay, this is time. This is where we consciously spend our lives, okay? Whether we're over here trying to undo or redo something that already happened, or trying to carry them into now as some sort of protective shield, or we're over here planning out the future, right? That's where we spend our time. But right here at the center, this is now. This is plumb center, okay? There's no past, there's no future, only what's actually happening. And this is where we get to live all kinds of different things and make all kinds of wonderful choices. They can only happen here, 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 now. Which is a really, really useful thing to recognize when we came to last week's talk and we realized that as long as we're already here making present choices with a present mind in the present moment, we might consider going big, right? Really leaping into every possible experience, fearlessly being completely you through everything, seizing every priceless moment and building a treasure chest of riches beyond your wildest dreams by, to quote Henry David Thoreau, sucking the marrow out of life. But this week certainly looks like I'm coming at things from a distinctly different perspective, right? So let's play with this for a minute, because when I laid the cross down and I saw these 4 squares, I didn't just see that playground game, right? I saw us. I saw how quickly we humans, we people, we take something that was intended to show us unity and we turn it into separation. And I did kind of touch on the Christian thing there for a minute. I'll back away. So this square over here, this is mine. And that one, that's yours. And that over there, that's theirs. And we don't go into that one. Those people are over here. We definitely can't deal with them. I'll talk to you, but not those 2. Right? And suddenly, instead of a meeting point, we have borders. Instead of a holy intersection, we have territory. Instead of oneness breathing deeply and expressing itself in 4 beautiful directions, we have 4 versions of them. And here's the part that really caught me as I observed. Those lines, they're not actually separating anything, they're just lines. They didn't divide the world. We did. We looked at something that was meant to show us where everything meets, and we turned it into a way to decide where everything doesn't. But remember what we said in week 1, that place where the lines intersect, where they meet, that center point, that is you. And if that is true, if you are standing at the exact point where all of these lines meet, then this whole game, you're it, right? But not in the way that you might think, because you're it has layers. And I want to walk through those with you. So the first one is the most obvious. Somebody always has to be it, right? We remember that from childhood. In every room, in every situation, in every game, somebody has to be the one who decides to move forward in some way. And the Apostle Paul knew this. You heard it this morning. He said, "Comfort those who lack courage. Bear the burdens of the weak. Return no evil for evil. Be joyful always." He didn't write that letter or epistle to the Thessalonians as a list of rules. He wasn't dictating. He wrote it as a description of how to be, of what someone looks like when they are standing at the very center of their own life, or for our purposes today, standing at their very own crossing point, and they decide to live from there. Somebody's gotta be it. And it may as well be you. But here's layer 2, and this one's a little bit more interesting. You are the source. Do you remember Socrates from our last reading from Way of the Peaceful Warrior? I didn't know I was going to pick that up. I turned around and went, because the bookcases are behind me, all willy-nilly. And I turned around and went, oh dear, where's it going to come from? And I looked all the way down at the bottom and it caught my eye. And I thought, there's no way that there's a reading in there that fits. But we're going to try it. And I opened the page and there it was. So you remember, Socrates is there. There's rain pouring down, and he's rolling in the wet leaves and laughing, while Dan is standing there soaked and absolutely furious, convinced that the rain did this to him, right? Socrates was not managing his reaction. There was no strategy or calculation of how to not let the weather ruin his day. He simply wasn't producing the experience of catastrophe. Sit with that for a second. He was not producing the experience of catastrophe. He wasn't generating a story. So the story had no grip. And if it isn't catastrophe, then oftentimes when you're living in that fully seized, marrowy goodness of a moment, you discover that it's delight. It's wonder. It's fun. And that's where Socrates was coming from. And Dan, meanwhile, our poor protagonist, he was generating his story so hard that the sun literally came back out and he was still mad about rain that had already stopped. Right? Does that sound familiar? Does anybody else, maybe I'm not pointing fingers or calling names, is anyone else maybe still upset about something that's already over already? No? Yeah? No one's going to nod at that one. I point no fingers again. You know if it hits. The truth is that your mind is the source of your experience, not your circumstances, not what is happening in other squares. You, right? You're right there in the center of it all. And that means it's either that whole idea is either terrifying or it's liberating, right? Depending on how you sit with it. And then there's layer 3. And this is the one that I really came to say today. The Course in Miracles tells us that open-mindedness is perhaps the last of the attributes a teacher of God acquires. Not the first, the very, very last. Everything else, the trust and the patience and the gentleness, the beholding beauty, those come first. And then when they have done their work, what's underneath them is revealed. And that is a mind that is finally, fully stopped sorting things. And what's left when the sorting stops, when the columns and tables are no longer there, holding your structure in place? That passage from A Course in Miracles says it very plainly. All sparkles now. All things are welcoming. The threat is gone. And that is what the world looks like from layer 3. Okay, you're not just it in the game. You are not just the source of your experience. You are it. You are the divine itself, wearing your particular face, staring and standing at your crossroads already, right now. It is yours to do. Here is what becomes true, actually experientially true, not theoretically true or intellectually true. When you stand at the center, fully, completely, when you're living all the things that we talked about in talk 1 and 2, when you are at the crossroads, in the middle, fully present and seizing it, marrow and all, you begin to see differently. Has anybody had a moment like that? Specifically, you can see, really see, without the sorting machinery running, that there's no one outside. Let me just illustrate this for a second. He's going to move the camera. Y'all can figure it out. If you are standing here, all you see are lines, not divisions. Right? No one's separated because you're connected to everything and everyone in that moment. Stick with me there, because that is the whole sermon in one idea. The world outside only makes sense when you've chosen a side. When you've planted yourself in one quadrant of that hypothetical cross, and you've named another quadrant over there. The moment that you stand at the center, when you are genuinely present and celebrating and open, the 4 areas are not separate territories. They are 4 directions in the same space that you're standing in. The person that everybody else is placed outside, they are not across a divide from where you stand. They are in a direction. Does that make sense yet? And this is where pre-forgiving lives. This is something that, as far as I know, is my own thing, right? I don't know that anybody else has articulated this, although I know that there are roots in it. And I gave this idea a name because it doesn't really have one in most of the traditions that I've studied. I think it needs one. So pre-forgiving is not the same as forgiving, because forgiving implies that there was a wrong committed, a debt acknowledged, and a grace extended, right? It's generous and It's real and it's sometimes a little judgy. But pre-forgiving is something else entirely. It is arriving without building the case in the first place. The slate isn't wiped clean. There is no slate. Okay? When you see someone, the difficult one, or the offensive one, the one that everyone else has quietly or maybe loudly voted off the island, and you look at them from that center, from that place where sorting has stopped, what you see is simply a person standing in a direction that's part of the space you're in. You don't move toward them as some act of virtue. You move because from where you are standing, there is no toward or away. You're already in the same space. The movement is natural. It's inevitable, even. The way water finds the low places, right? As it flows. It doesn't happen with effort. It happens because that's simply what water does when nothing's in the way. Embrace what happens when you see someone as what they are. Not the story, not the attitudes, not the judgment. What they are. Love. That's all everyone is. And pre-forgiveness allows you to see that clearly. Every room has noise. Every divided situation, every family gathering, there's never conflict at those, are there? No. Every workplace tension, every two people on opposite sides of something that they have decided matters enormously, has a surface layer of discord. Voices raised and sides chosen. The energetic equivalent of everyone standing in their own quadrant with their arms crossed going, I'm correct and they're not. Right? The noise is real. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you to spiritually bypass it or to breathe it away, right? Or to just be positive. I'm not going to give you that because the noise is real. But here is what I know from standing at the center of a few noisy rooms in my time. Underneath every noise, there's a melody. There's a thread running through every apparent division, the shared longing, the common ache, the thing that looks like anger from one angle and grief from another and fear from another still, but is underneath all of that noise, it's the same thing. It's a bunch of people saying, I want to be seen. I want to belong. I want to know that I matter. That's the melody. It's playing in every room all of the time, and most of us are just generating too much noise or becoming too distracted by the noise to hear it. But when you stand at the center and you're present and you're celebrating everyone, pre-forgiving and standing where there's no outside, you begin to hear that cry for love. Not metaphorically, but actually. You respond. You hear what the noise is about underneath the noise, and then something really beautiful happens. Simply by being someone who hears it, you bring it into the room. You meet the call for love See me, include me, hear me. And you say, I see you, I hear you, come, be with me. By being someone who hears it, you bring it into the situation. You don't announce it and say, hold on, everybody, what I see here is that like all of you were crying out for attention, so let me give you my attention. That will not go well, right? You don't announce it, you don't directly teach it. You don't demonstrate it as an example with that thought behind it. You just kind of hum it. You carry the truth of it with you in how you stand, in how you listen, in the questions that you ask, in the absence of the wall that you chose not to build. And the room hears something it didn't know it was missing, and it reorganizes around it. When you include them in us, there's only us. That is not a byproduct of living talks 1 and 2. That's not a nice side effect of being present and celebrating your crossroads moments. That is what the world sounds like in here and in here when you do. That is the divine doing what the divine always does through the perfectly ordinary vessel of a person who simply chose at a crossroads in a moment on a random Sunday to stand fully present, to claim it and to listen beneath the noise. So 3 talks here, 1 breath. Talk 1, every moment is a crossroads. You are the center. Choose consciously, notice it. Talk 2, having chosen the center, having committed to seeing every opportunity, dive in, seize it, suck the marrow, feast rather than nibble, claim them all. Talk 3, this is what the world sounds like when you've been doing the others. When you've been noticing and claiming and living from center, and you walk into a room where the noise is very, very loud. You can hear the melody and you bring it with you without even trying, because you're not sorting it. You become the melody, the instrument, and the whole world begins to dance gracefully to the melody you first heard, because you loved enough to reveal it. You're it in the game. You're it as the source. Make your choices. You are it, the divine, alive and present, wearing your face, standing at your crossroads, which means that the person standing in the far quadrant, the one that everyone has written off or written out or quietly agreed to not invite anymore, they're only in a direction. And you're standing somewhere that they can begin to hear the melody. And they can begin to hear the melody. And that's the whole thing. Your invitation this week is to find one room, just one, where the noise is doing its thing. Okay? It might be a family dinner, it might be a work meeting, it might be a comment section. If you have the spiritual fortitude to go into one, pre-forgiving, And instead of generating your response to the noise, instead of jumping into your quadrant and getting comfortable and cross-armed and, yeah, what you said, right? Just listen for the melody. Listen to the truth of what's happening underneath all of it. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to fix anything or name it or offer it as wisdom. Just hear it. Be for one moment the one who immediately knows that the melody is there. And then watch what your presence alone does. Even in the comment section, you'll feel a shift. I promise you. Because you have been at all the crossroads thus far, right? Really been there. And you've claimed each moment. So now listen for the song. Because you're it. And so it is. Amen.